Millionaire decides to go out with the most rejected employee in his company to avoid spending Christmas alone. But at the end of Christmas night, he discovers that, hello and welcome to 80s Love Stories, where I, your favorite narrator, Christopher, bring you an exciting love story straight from the unforgettable 1980s. Get ready for a journey full of nostalgia and incredible twists. Today's story is truly remarkable, with an ending that's sure to touch your heart and leave you amazed. So, stay with me until the very last moment. I hope this experience is unforgettable for you, and may God bless you and your family. Now, let's get started. December 23rd, 1983. The grey winter sky loomed over Manhattan as Michael Reynolds stared out the window of his corner office at Reynolds Enterprises. At 42, he had everything money could buy: expensive suits, a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and a Fortune 500 company. Yet as he watched the snow beginning to fall, coating the city in white, he felt the familiar emptiness creeping in. The sound of Christmas carols drifting up from the office party 19 floors below only amplified his isolation. Another Christmas Eve approaching, and once again, he would spend it alone. His marriage had ended 3 years ago, and his ex-wife had taken their daughter to California. The thought of another silent night in his perfectly decorated but soulless penthouse made his chest tighten. Michael loosened his silk tie and walked to his desk, covered with end-of-year reports. His eyes fell on a personnel file he'd been reviewing earlier, Rachel Thompson, 28, from the accounting department. He'd noticed her a few times in the elevator or break room, always alone, always keeping to herself. The other employees seemed to avoid her, whispering behind her back about her outdated clothes and quiet demeanor. Something about her reminded him of himself before his success, that look of determination mixed with loneliness. He'd overheard her telling the receptionist she'd be working through Christmas Eve to catch up on reports, just like him. An idea began to form in his mind. Perhaps they could both avoid a lonely Christmas Eve. It was crazy, completely unlike him to even consider it. The CEO asking out a low-level employee. The gossip would spread like wildfire. But something about Rachel's file photo, the hint of sadness behind her professional smile, made him reach for his phone. "Janet, could you ask Rachel Thompson from accounting to come to my office?" 10 minutes later, there was a hesitant knock at his door. Rachel entered, clutching a notebook to her chest like a shield. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her clothes modest and at least 5 years out of style. But her eyes, there was an intelligence there, a depth that caught him off guard. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Reynolds?" Her voice was soft but steady. "Yes, please sit down." Michael gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. He noticed how she perched on the edge, as if ready to flee at any moment. "I understand you'll be working tomorrow evening." "Yes, sir. I like to stay caught up on my reports." She straightened slightly, defensive. "What would you say to having dinner with me instead?" Rachel's eyes widened in shock. I don't understand." "It's simple, really. Neither of us should spend Christmas Eve alone. I know an excellent restaurant that's open tomorrow night. We could have dinner, perhaps drive around and see the Christmas lights." He tried to keep his tone casual, though his heart was racing at his own boldness. "Mr. Reynolds, She gripped her notebook tighter. "Just why me?" It was a fair question. He could have asked anyone, models, socialites. Countless women would jump at the chance to spend Christmas Eve with Michael Reynolds, but he was tired of artificial connections, of people who only saw his wealth and status. "Because I think we might both benefit from some genuine company tomorrow night. No expectations, no pressure, just dinner and conversation." He smiled, trying to put her at ease. "What do you say?" Rachel sat silent for a long moment, studying him as if trying to detect some hidden agenda. Finally, she gave a small nod. "All right. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Michael, please. I'll have my driver pick you up at 7. "Yes. Michael." She stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "I'll be ready." As Rachel left his office, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. But there was something else too, a nagging feeling that tomorrow night would change everything. He just couldn't know yet whether that change would be for better or worse. What he didn't notice was the shadow that passed across Rachel's face just before she closed his door, a flicker of emotion that, had he seen it, might have warned him that there was much more to Rachel Thompson than met the eye. December 24th, 1983, Christmas Eve. Rachel stood in front of her small bedroom mirror, examining her reflection with critical eyes. The dress she wore was the nicest she owned, a navy blue number she'd found at a thrift store and carefully altered herself. It was modest by current standards, but at least it fit well. She'd spent hours pressing it to perfection, trying to remove any hint that it wasn't brand new. Her tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn was a far cry from the luxury she imagined Michael Reynolds was used to. The radiator clanked and hissed in the corner, barely keeping the winter chill at bay. A small artificial Christmas tree sat on her dresser, its sparse decorations reflecting the limited budget of a junior accountant. As she pinned her hair up, letting a few soft curls frame her face, Rachel's hands trembled slightly. She opened her worn leather purse, checking once again that the envelope was still there. The paper was starting to show wear at the edges from how many times she'd taken it out, read it, and put it back over the last 3 months. "Just get through tonight," she whispered to her reflection. "You have to know the truth." The sound of a car horn outside made her jump. Through her frosted window, she could see the sleek black Lincoln Town Car waiting by the curb, looking completely out of place in her working-class neighborhood. Rachel took a deep breath, grabbed her coat, and headed downstairs. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, held the door for her. "Good evening, Miss Thompson. I'm Franklin. Mr. Reynolds is waiting at the restaurant." The interior of the car was warm and smelled of leather. As they drove through the snow-covered streets of Brooklyn toward Manhattan, Rachel watched the Christmas lights blur past her window, trying to calm her racing heart. This wasn't how she'd planned things, but maybe this way would be better. Meanwhile, at Le Bernardin, one of Manhattan's most exclusive French restaurants, Michael Reynolds sat at a corner table, absently turning his wine glass. The maitre d' had raised an eyebrow when he requested a table for 2 on Christmas Eve. Michael Reynolds was known for dining alone. The restaurant was decorated tastefully for the holiday, with white lights and elegant greenery. Soft Christmas music played in the background, mixed with the gentle murmur of other diners. He checked his watch again. 7:15. Franklin was usually punctual. Had Rachel changed her mind? The thought bothered him more than it should. Just then he saw her. Rachel stood in the restaurant entrance, looking uncertain as she handed her coat to the maitre d'. The simple navy dress she wore was outdated, but there was an elegance in how she carried herself. Her hair, usually severely pulled back at work, now softly framed her face, making her look younger, more vulnerable. Michael stood as she approached the table. "You look lovely," he said, meaning it. "Thank you." Rachel's cheeks flushed slightly as she sat down. "I've never been to a place like this before. I hope you like French cuisine." He signaled the waiter. "The chef here makes an incredible Dover sole." As they studied their menus, Michael noticed Rachel's hands shaking slightly. "Are you cold?" "No, just a bit nervous, I suppose." She gave a small laugh. "This isn't exactly a normal Christmas Eve for me." "What would you normally be doing?" Michael asked, genuinely curious. Rachel's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Working, usually. My family. We're not close." The waiter arrived with wine, and Michael watched as Rachel took a careful sip. There was something about her that intrigued him, a depth behind her quiet demeanor that he couldn't quite figure out. "Tell me about yourself, Rachel. How did you end up at Reynolds Enterprises?" She set down her wine glass carefully. "My background isn't very interesting. I studied accounting at City College, worked a few small jobs, then applied to your company. I've always been good with numbers." She paused. "What about you? Do you usually work on Christmas Eve?" "Ever since the divorce," Michael admitted. "My daughter's in California with her mother. We'll talk on the phone tomorrow, but—" He trailed off, surprised by his own openness. "It must be difficult," Rachel said softly, "being away from her." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their appetizers, delicate seafood mousses that made Rachel's eyes widen in appreciation. As they ate, Michael found himself talking more than he had in months. There was something about Rachel that made it easy to open up. He told her about building his company from nothing, about his failed marriage, about the loneliness of success. She listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed she understood business far better than her junior position would suggest. But whenever he tried to learn more about her own past, Rachel would skillfully deflect the conversation back to him. It was so subtle he almost didn't notice at first. Between courses, Michael excused himself to take a call from his West Coast office. When he returned, he caught Rachel quickly tucking something back into her purse. Was it a letter? She smiled at him, but there was tension around her eyes that hadn't been there before. As their entrees arrived, the restaurant's string quartet began playing Silent Night. Rachel stared at her plate, blinking rapidly. "Are you all right?" Michael asked gently. "Yes, it's just this song. My mother used to sing it to me when I was little." She looked up at him, and for a moment, her carefully maintained composure cracked. There was pain in her eyes, and something else. Determination. "Rachel, why did you really agree to have dinner with me tonight?" Before she could answer, a commotion near the restaurant entrance drew their attention. A man was arguing with the maitre d', his voice getting louder. "I know she's here. Rachel Thompson. I saw her come in." Rachel's face went white. The envelope in her purse suddenly felt like it was burning a hole through the leather. "Do you know him?" Michael asked, already signaling for the waiter. "We need to leave," Rachel whispered. "Now." Michael didn't hesitate. He quickly paid the bill while Rachel got her coat. They slipped out through the kitchen entrance just as the man broke past the maitre d' and entered the main dining room. In the town car, Rachel sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The envelope in her purse held secrets that could destroy everything Michael Reynolds had built. But now, looking at his concerned face in the dim light, she wondered if she could go through with her original plan. What neither of them knew was that this Christmas Eve was about to become far more complicated than either had imagined, and the truth, when it finally came out, would change both their lives forever. Snow was falling heavily as Franklin navigated the town car through Manhattan's streets. The city's Christmas lights reflected off the fresh snow, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the tension inside the vehicle. Rachel sat silently, her fingers nervously tracing the outline of the envelope in her purse. Michael watched her, noting how she flinched at every passing car. "Would you like to talk about what just happened?" he asked gently. Rachel stared out the window, watching the Bloomingdale's holiday displays blur past. "I'm sorry about dinner. I should go home." "Rachel." Michael's voice was firm but kind. "Someone was looking for you. Someone who clearly upset you. As your employer and friend, I'm concerned." She turned to face him, and in the passing streetlights, he could see tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Friend?" She gave a bitter laugh. "You don't even know me, Mr. Reynolds." "Then help me understand." He leaned forward. "Franklin, take us to my penthouse. We'll have coffee and talk." Rachel's eyes widened. "I don't think—" "Please," Michael interrupted. "It's Christmas Eve. It's snowing, and someone who clearly means you harm is looking for you. Let me help." After a long moment, Rachel nodded slightly. Franklin smoothly changed direction, heading toward Central Park West. Michael's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a pre-war building overlooking Central Park. The doorman tipped his hat as they entered, and the elevator operator wished them a Merry Christmas as they ascended to the top floor. Rachel hugged her coat tightly around herself, feeling increasingly out of place. The penthouse was exactly what she'd imagined: elegant, expensive, and impersonal. A massive Christmas tree stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, professionally decorated in gold and white. Everything was perfect, yet nothing felt lived in. "Coffee?" Michael asked, helping her with her coat. "Please." He disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Rachel alone in the vast living room. She walked to the windows, looking out at the snowy park below. Her hand went to her purse again, feeling the envelope that had brought her into Michael Reynolds' life. When Michael returned with 2 cups of coffee, he found Rachel standing by his desk, holding a framed photograph. It showed a younger Michael with a little girl on his shoulders, both laughing at something outside the frame. "My daughter," Emma, he said, setting down the coffee cups. That was taken the summer before the divorce. She has your smile, Rachel said softly, replacing the photo. How long has it been since you've seen her? 2 years. Michael's voice was heavy with regret. My ex-wife remarried and moved to California. I send presents. We talk on the phone, but... He shrugged. Work always seemed more important somehow, until it wasn't. Rachel took a sip of coffee, using the moment to gather her thoughts. Why did you really ask me to dinner tonight? Michael considered the question. Honestly, I saw something familiar in you, that look of someone carrying a heavy burden alone. He met her eyes. Was I wrong? Rachel set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. No, she whispered. You weren't wrong. She opened her purse and withdrew the envelope, holding it for a moment before placing it on the desk between them. The paper was worn at the edges, clearly read many times. The man at the restaurant. His name is James Morton. He was my mother's husband, not my father, but the man she married when I was 12. Rachel's voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tightly together. He worked for Reynolds Enterprises in 1975 in the Chicago office. Michael frowned, trying to remember. That was before the company went public. We had to close that office during the recession. Yes, and when it closed, several employees lost everything, including my mother and James. Rachel's eyes were fixed on the envelope. My mother, she couldn't handle it. The stress, the shame of bankruptcy. Rachel's voice broke. I'm so sorry, Michael said softly, understanding what she couldn't say. James blamed your company, blamed you personally. He disappeared after the funeral. I was sent to live with my aunt in Brooklyn. Rachel took a deep breath. 3 months ago he found me. He'd been tracking you, planning something. He gave me this envelope, said it contained proof that you'd deliberately bankrupted the Chicago office to buy the assets cheap before going public. He wanted me to get a job here, to get close to the company records. Michael reached for the envelope, but Rachel pulled it back. It's not what you think, she said quickly. The documents, they're fake. I realized it as soon as I started working in accounting. The numbers don't match our historical records. James forged everything. Why are you telling me this now? Because he's becoming unstable. When I told him I wouldn't help him destroy you, he started threatening me, following me. She looked up at Michael, her eyes full of guilt and fear. I agreed to dinner tonight because I needed to warn you. I never expected, she gestured helplessly around the elegant room, any of this. Michael stood and walked to the windows, processing everything he'd heard. The snow was falling harder now, Central Park transforming into a white wonderland below them. When he turned back to Rachel, his expression was unreadable. So the quiet, unassuming accountant was placed in my company as part of a revenge plot. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Why should I believe your story about the documents being fake? How do I know this isn't part of a larger plan? Rachel stood, squaring her shoulders. Because I could have given these to the press weeks ago, fake or not. The scandal alone would have hurt your company, your reputation. Instead, I'm here telling you the truth. She picked up her purse. I should go. As she turned toward the elevator, Michael called out, Wait. There was something in her face, in her voice, that rang true. And hadn't he noticed, over the past few hours, how she genuinely seemed to care about his loneliness, his regrets about Emma? But before he could say more, the penthouse phone rang. It was the doorman. Mr. Reynolds, there's a man down here insisting on coming up. Says his name is James Morton. He's becoming aggressive. Should I call the police? Michael looked at Rachel, saw the fear return to her eyes. This Christmas Eve was far from over, and the next few hours would test them both in ways neither could imagine. Michael hung up the phone, his mind racing. Through the penthouse windows, the snow continued to fall, creating an almost surreal backdrop to the drama unfolding below. Rachel stood frozen, her face pale in the soft lamplight. He won't stop, she whispered. Not until he ruins everything. Michael made a quick decision. Franklin's still downstairs. We can leave through the service elevator? No. Rachel's voice was surprisingly firm. I'm tired of running. This needs to end tonight. Michael studied her face, seeing not the quiet accountant from his office, but a woman of remarkable strength. "All right," he said, "but we do this my way." He picked up the phone again. "Jerry, let him up, but first call Sullivan from building security. Have him and his team waiting in the stairwell." The next few minutes passed with excruciating slowness. Rachel paced by the windows while Michael went to his study, returning with a small cassette recorder, which he placed discreetly on his desk. The elevator chimed. James Morton burst into the penthouse like a storm. He was a tall man in his 50s, his once expensive coat now shabby, his grey hair wild. His eyes locked onto Rachel immediately. "You little traitor," he snarled. "I gave you one simple task, one chance to avenge your mother's death, and instead I find you dining with him." He gestured wildly at Michael, "having a romantic Christmas Eve with the man who destroyed our lives." "You're wrong, James." Rachel's voice shook, but she stood her ground. "I've seen the company records. What happened in Chicago was his fault," James roared. "He knew the Chicago office was profitable. He deliberately bankrupted us to buy the assets cheap before going public. Your mother died because of his greed." "That's not true." Michael's calm voice cut through James's rage. "The Chicago office was losing money for months. I tried everything to save it. Loans, restructuring, even putting in my own money. But the recession hit us hard. When we had to close it, I made sure every employee got a severance package." "Lies!" James reached into his coat. Rachel gasped as he pulled out a revolver. The weapon looked old, probably bought illegally, but deadly nonetheless. James's hand trembled as he pointed it at Michael. "I had everything planned," he said, his voice cracking. "Rachel would find proof in the company records. The press would destroy you, but she betrayed me, just like you betrayed us." "James," Rachel stepped forward. "My mother's death wasn't Michael's fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. She was sick long before the Chicago office closed. You know that." James's hand wavered. "She would have gotten better if we'd had the money for treatment." "The insurance covered her treatment," Rachel said softly. "I found the papers in her things after she died. She stopped taking her medication months before the office closed. She'd stopped seeing her doctors. The bankruptcy wasn't the reason, James. Her illness was too strong." "No!" But doubt had crept into James's voice. Michael watched the exchange, seeing the pain in both their faces. Slowly, he walked to his desk and picked up the envelope Rachel had brought. "These documents," he said, holding them up. "You forged them to prove I deliberately bankrupted Chicago. But there's something you didn't know. Something Rachel discovered when she started working in accounting." James's grip on the gun tightened. "What are you talking about?" "The paper," Rachel explained. "I had the watermark on these documents. It's from a paper manufacturer that didn't exist until 1980. But these are supposedly from 1975. The color drained from James's face. The gun lowered slightly. "You've been carrying this guilt, this anger for so long," Rachel continued, taking a careful step toward him. "But it's based on a lie you created to make sense of something senseless. My mother's death wasn't Michael's fault. It wasn't your fault either." Outside, church bells began to ring, marking midnight. Christmas had arrived, filling the snowy night with their solemn music. James Morton stood in Michael Reynolds' penthouse, a broken man holding a gun, while the woman he'd tried to use for revenge showed him more compassion than he deserved. "I miss her too," Rachel said softly. "Every day. But this isn't what she would have wanted. Please put the gun down." James looked at the weapon in his hand as if seeing it for the first time. His shoulders sagged. The gun clattered to the floor. Sullivan and his security team burst in from the stairwell, but Michael waved them back. James offered no resistance as they led him away. He looked old and defeated, the fire of revenge that had sustained him for so long finally extinguished. After the police arrived and took statements, after James was taken away in a patrol car, Michael and Rachel stood in silence, looking out at the snowy city. The cassette recorder on the desk had captured everything. Insurance if James ever tried to cause trouble again, though somehow Michael doubted he would. "I should go," Rachel said finally. "I'll have my resignation on your desk tomorrow." "Resignation?" Michael turned to her, surprised. "Why?" After everything that's happened, the lies, the deception, you came here tonight to warn me, Michael said. You chose truth over revenge. That tells me exactly the kind of person you are. He paused. The kind of person I want working for my company, the kind of person I'd like to know better. Rachel met his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. The church bells had stopped, but their echoes seemed to linger in the quiet penthouse. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a clean white blanket, as if nature itself was offering a fresh start. But the night still held one more surprise, a revelation that would change everything between them. The grandfather clock in Michael's penthouse chimed 1 in the morning, Christmas Day. After the police left, Franklin had brought up hot chocolate from the all-night diner around the corner, a simple comfort after the night's drama. Rachel sat on the leather sofa, her high heels discarded, hands wrapped around the warm mug. Michael watched her from his position by the fireplace. The flames cast a warm glow across her face, softening the worry lines that had been present during James's confrontation. She looked younger now, more vulnerable, yet somehow stronger. "You never told me about the insurance papers," he said quietly. "How long have you known the truth about your mother's illness?" Rachel stared into her mug. "I found them when I was cleaning out her house after the funeral. Medical records, prescription bottles, diary entries. She'd been struggling with depression for years, long before Chicago. James couldn't accept it. It was easier to blame someone else than face the fact that sometimes—" She trailed off, blinking back tears. "Sometimes we can't save the people we love," Michael finished softly. Rachel looked up, surprised by the understanding in his voice. "Yes." Michael sat beside her on the sofa, close but not touching. "When my marriage was falling apart, I threw myself into work, told myself I was providing for my family, building something for Emma's future. By the time I realized what I was losing, it was too late." "It's never too late," Rachel said. "Emma's still your daughter. And yet here I am on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day now, instead of being with her." "You're afraid." The simple truth of her words struck him. "How did you know?" "Because I recognize it. It's the same reason I buried myself in accounting, in numbers that always made sense when nothing else did. It's safer to hide behind work than risk being hurt again." Michael studied her face in the firelight. "Is that what you were doing at Reynolds Enterprises, hiding? At first, then James found me, and suddenly I had a purpose, even if it was the wrong one." She set down her mug. "When I started working there, I was so angry at you, at what I thought you'd done. But then I saw how you treated people, how you remembered the maintenance staff's names, how you started that college fund for employees' children. The real reason I asked you to dinner," Michael said slowly, "wasn't just because I didn't want to be alone. There was something about you that seemed familiar, like I knew you somehow." Rachel tensed slightly. "Michael, when you talked about your mother tonight, something clicked. The way you move your hands when you're nervous, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking." He leaned forward. "I knew your mother before she married James, didn't I?" The color drained from Rachel's face. She stood abruptly, walking to the windows. The snow had stopped, and the city lights sparkled like stars fallen to earth. "Rachel." 1962, she said, so quietly he almost missed it. "You were just starting out in business. You worked with my father at Carlton Industries." Michael's mind raced back. Carlton Industries, his first job out of college. Thomas Carlton had taken him under his wing, taught him everything about business. And Thomas's daughter, Sarah. "Sarah was your mother?" Rachel nodded, still facing the window. "She never told James, never told anyone except me, and that was only after she got sick. She made me promise not to tell." Michael sank back into the sofa, memories flooding back. Sarah Carlton, the boss's daughter, kind and beautiful. They'd dated briefly, secretly, until her father found out. Thomas Carlton had made it clear, end the relationship or lose the job. Michael, young and ambitious, chose his career. A month later, Sarah had left town. She was pregnant, he whispered, realization dawning. "Oh, when she left?" "Yes." Rachel finally turned to face him. In the firelight, the resemblance to Sarah was striking. "I was born 7 months later." The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Michael stared at Rachel, at his daughter, seeing now what his heart had recognized from the beginning. The intelligence in her eyes, the determined set of her jaw, the way she fought for what was right, despite her fears. She was his child. "All these months working at Reynolds Enterprises," he said hoarsely, "you knew." "Not at first. When James approached me, I had no idea you were that you were him. Mother only told me my father's name was Michael, that he'd gone on to be successful. It wasn't until I started working there, saw you up close." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I told myself I was there for James's revenge plan, but really I just wanted to know you." Michael stood, taking a step toward her, then stopping. "Why didn't you tell me?" "How could I? I was supposed to be helping James destroy you. And then, when I realized his documents were fake and when I saw the kind of man you really were," she gave a small, sad laugh, "I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in your eyes when you learned the truth, that your own daughter had tried to ruin you." Disappointment. Michael closed the distance between them, gently turning her to face him. "Rachel, you chose truth over revenge. You protected me despite believing I'd wronged your mother. How could I be anything but proud?" Tears spilled down Rachel's cheeks. Michael reached out hesitantly, then pulled her into a hug. She stiffened for a moment before melting into her father's embrace for the first time in her life. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and quiet. The clock struck 2 on Christmas morning as father and daughter held each other, making up for 28 years of lost time. But the night still held one more revelation, a final truth about Sarah that would change everything they thought they knew. Michael and Rachel sat on the floor near the Christmas tree, surrounded by old photographs that Michael had retrieved from his study. The fire had died down to glowing embers, but neither made a move to revive it. Outside, the city slept under its blanket of fresh snow, while inside, father and daughter pieced together their shared past. "This is the only picture I have of your mother from back then," Michael said softly, holding out a faded Polaroid. In it, a young Sarah Carlton stood laughing by a fountain, her dark hair catching the sunlight. It was taken at Central Park, summer of '62. Rachel touched the photograph gently. She kept one just like it, hidden in her jewelry box. "I found it after we lost her." She reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet, extracting a worn photograph. "See?" Michael's hands trembled as he held the 2 photos side by side. They were taken moments apart. In Rachel's version, Sarah was looking directly at the camera, her smile radiant. "I took this one," he said, "and another photographer took mine when Sarah insisted we should both have a photo to remember the day. She used to take out her photo on my birthday," Rachel said quietly. "She'd tell me stories about you. Nothing specific, just that you were kind and smart, that you had big dreams. She never said anything negative, even though she must have been hurt when I chose my career over her," Michael finished, his voice heavy with regret. "If I'd known she was pregnant, would it have changed things?" Michael looked at his daughter, this remarkable woman who'd carried so many burdens alone. "Yes," he said firmly, "everything would have been different." Rachel pulled another item from her purse, an envelope, different from the one containing James's forged documents. "There's something else you should know," she said hesitantly. "After the confrontation with James tonight, I was going to leave without ever telling you the truth about who I am. But Mother, she left this for you." The envelope was addressed simply to Michael in Sarah's elegant handwriting. It was dated just 2 weeks before her death. Michael opened it carefully, unfolding the pages inside. As he read, his face went through a range of emotions: surprise, pain, and finally, understanding. "She never blamed me," he whispered. "No," Rachel confirmed. "She wanted you to know that, and there's more. Something she never told anyone, not even James." Michael continued reading, his eyes widening. "The Carlton Industries merger. She tried to warn me." Rachel nodded. "She discovered her father was planning to sell the company's assets secretly, then declare bankruptcy, leaving all the employees, including you, with nothing. She tried to reach you, to warn you, But her father intercepted her messages. That's why she left so suddenly, Michael said, realization dawning, not just because of our relationship or the pregnancy, but because she couldn't bear to watch her father's betrayal unfold. She wrote that you were smart enough to figure it out on your own. You pulled your investments just in time, started your own company. Rachel smiled sadly. She was proud of you, even from afar. Michael stared at the letter, decades of guilt and misconceptions unraveling. I always thought Thomas Carlton had driven her away because I wasn't good enough for his daughter. I never knew that she left to protect you. That's who she was, always protecting others. Rachel's voice caught. Even at the end, when she was struggling with her illness, she made sure I would be taken care of. The aunt I lived with after her death. She wasn't really my aunt. She was Mother's closest friend, someone she trusted to guide me until what? Until I was ready to find you. Mother believed that someday, when the time was right, we would find our way back to each other. She just didn't expect it to happen quite like this. Michael set the letter down carefully. All these years, I've measured my success by the size of my company, by the deals I've made. But sitting here with you, learning about Sarah's sacrifice, her strength, I realize I've been measuring the wrong things. Rachel leaned her head against her father's shoulder, a gesture so natural it surprised them both. It's not too late to measure different things, she said softly. Michael wrapped an arm around his daughter. No, it's not. Starting now. The grandfather clock struck 4 in the morning. Christmas Day was well underway, and in a few hours, Michael would normally be making his annual phone call to Emma in California. But this year would be different. This year, he had another daughter to introduce, another chance to be the father he should have been all along. But first, there was one final piece of Sarah's story to uncover, a truth hidden in plain sight all these years, waiting for this exact moment to be revealed. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan, painting the snow-covered city in soft pink and gold. Michael and Rachel had moved to the kitchen, where the smell of fresh coffee mingled with the lingering scent of pine from the Christmas tree. They sat at the breakfast counter, Sarah's letter between them, both exhausted but unwilling to let this newfound connection end. There's something else in the letter, Rachel said quietly. Something Mother wanted you to have. She carefully extracted a small key that had been taped to the final page. Michael took it, turning it over in his hands. What does it open? A safety deposit box at Manhattan Savings Bank. Mother set it up before she died, paid for 20 years in advance. She knew that when I found you, when the time was right. Rachel's voice trailed off. Michael checked his watch. The bank won't open until tomorrow. Actually, Rachel smiled, Manhattan Savings has a special Christmas Day service for their top clients. They open for 2 hours this morning, starting at 8 a.m. Mother knew you'd be a client there. It's where Reynolds Enterprises does its banking. Michael shook his head in amazement. Sarah thought of everything. She believed in Christmas miracles, Rachel said softly. She said that's why she chose today, of all days, for us to discover the truth. At 7:45, Michael and Rachel entered the marble-floored lobby of Manhattan Savings Bank. A few other clients were already there, making their Christmas morning transactions. The elderly security guard, who had worked there since Michael started his company, greeted them warmly. Mr. Reynolds, Merry Christmas, sir. And this is my daughter, Michael said, the words filling him with pride. Rachel Thompson. They were led to the safety deposit room, where the bank manager herself helped them locate Box 1962, the year Sarah and Michael had met. With trembling hands, Michael inserted the key. Inside the box was a small leather-bound diary and an envelope containing what looked like legal documents, but it was the gold locket lying on top that caught their attention. Michael recognized it immediately. He had given it to Sarah on their last night together. Mother wore this every day, Rachel said, picking it up carefully. But it disappeared after she died. I always wondered. She opened it and gasped. Inside was a tiny photograph of Michael from 1962, and opposite it, a picture of baby Rachel. But there was something else, a folded paper tucked behind the photos. Rachel extracted it carefully, her hands shaking. It's a letter of inheritance, she said, scanning the document, from Thomas Carlton, Michael leaned in to read. His eyes widened. This can't be. But it was. Thomas Carlton, Sarah's father, had left a significant portion of his estate to Rachel, his granddaughter. The inheritance had been held in trust, to be revealed only when Rachel found her true father. "There's more," Rachel said, reading from Sarah's diary. "Mother confronted her father before she left. He admitted he was wrong about you, about everything. The guilt of what he'd planned to do to the company, to you, it changed him. He set up this inheritance in secret, his way of trying to make things right." "But why didn't Sarah tell me sooner?" Michael wondered. "Because," Rachel read from the diary's final entry, "some gifts need the right moment to be given. Michael, if you're reading this, it means our daughter found her way to you. The inheritance isn't just money, it's proof that love can change even the hardest hearts. Father learned that. James, I hope, will learn it too. And you, my dear Michael, never needed to learn it because you always had love in your heart, even if you sometimes forgot to listen to it." Michael wiped tears from his eyes. She knew me better than I knew myself. Rachel closed the diary gently. She knew we all needed forgiveness. You, her father, even James. That's why she made sure I had what I needed to find you. But only when I was ready to understand the whole truth. Michael's phone rang. The car phone in his Lincoln, patched through by Franklin. It was Emma, calling for their annual Christmas morning chat. "Merry Christmas, Dad. Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Michael looked at Rachel, who smiled encouragingly. "Emma, there's someone very special I want you to meet, your sister." As Michael handed the phone to Rachel, watching his daughters speak to each other for the first time, he thought about Sarah's words about love changing hearts. His own heart had been changed in ways he never expected, all because he'd asked a quiet accountant to Christmas Eve dinner. Later that morning, as snow began falling again over the city, Michael and Rachel sat in his penthouse, planning Emma's visit for New Year's. The inheritance papers lay forgotten on the desk. They were important, but not as important as the real gift Sarah had given them, the chance to be a family. "What made you decide to stay?" Michael asked suddenly. "After James, when you could have just left with the truth about who you are." Rachel thought for a moment. "Because I saw in your eyes the same loneliness I carried all my life, the same need to belong." She smiled. "Mother always said the greatest Christmas gifts aren't the ones we find under the tree, but the ones we find in our hearts when we're finally ready to open them." Michael took his daughter's hand. Outside, church bells rang across the city, celebrating Christmas Day. But the real celebration was in the quiet understanding between father and daughter, in the healing of old wounds, and in the promise of new beginnings. Sarah's final gift hadn't just been the inheritance or the truth about the past. It was the reminder that love, forgiveness, and family were always worth the wait, even if it took 28 years and a Christmas Eve dinner to find them. So as the snow fell softly outside, Michael and Rachel began planning their future, not as CEO and accountant, but as father and daughter. And somewhere, they both felt, Sarah was smiling, knowing her Christmas miracle had finally come true. Thank you for watching today's story. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to relive the magic of the 80s every day with our heartfelt stories. May God bless you and your family, and don't forget to click on the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another totally rad story you won't want to miss. See you in the next video, and stay awesome.